Hey guys, how's it going? Eli here, back with another video where today we're going to be having a breakdown about my top 5 undervalued / affordable items to invest in right now in the WOTC era of product. Without further ado, let's just jump right into it. So as always, getting out of the way, we have weekly giveaways. Each and every Monday is when we announce the winners, and so today we're going to be announcing our winners. If you wonder how you enter into our weekly giveaways, all you have to do is be subscribed and then leave a like and comment down below on any of the videos we post each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Monday, Wednesday, Friday are our regular pre-recorded video sessions for just general market talk, and then Thursdays are our extra day as well to enter if you want to watch our compilation videos of some of the older Diamond and Pearl era products I'm going to be opening. But for those people, of course, that are wondering who the 3 winners are, because there's 3 winners each and every week that will be receiving 12 Brilliant Star Booster Packs. Without further ado, drum roll, we're going to do the reveal. So the 3 winners are for James W, Tiberius, and then I'm We. So if you want to, of course, be eligible to obtain your packs, please make sure to either message me on Discord, links down in the description below, or shoot me over an email. I'm quicker to respond on Discord. I do apologize for those people that haven't received their packs. If you haven't received them from last week, there's been a little bit of delay. You should be receiving your packs in the next couple of weeks. So it takes me a while sometimes to respond to emails. So, with that being said, I will, of course, still send you out your packs at the end of the day. Just send me a screenshot of basic proof showing that, of course, it is you. Most of the time, people just have like them logged in and then showing their comment that one, and basically, or just of them commenting and being able to edit it. Now that we've gotten that part out of the way, jumping into today's topic. So this is a topic that I felt would actually be a really good discussion. I hear a lot of the times people say Wizards of the Coast era product is unaffordable. It's just not worth it to invest in a lot of WotC stuff is kind of the main sentiment I hear. Now, obviously, as you guys are aware, we're very much so a channel that focuses mainly on ultra modern. Of course, there's a lot of other aspects of the market that we do discuss. Sometimes we talk about DPP era, sometimes we talk about, XY era, black and white era, and other EX era and so on and so forth, but we mainly focus on what's going on in the reprint market. We focus as well on what's going to be some of the best picks going into the future and why, what sets we like, kind of Pokemon news focused. But I do think that I would be with remorse if I did not at least have a discussion about saying there are items in WotC that are affordable for you to invest in long term. Now, of course, one thing that people need to take into consideration when I show you this list is when we talk about what is affordable. Obviously, when you're saying to yourself, I can go buy a booster box, 36 packs of an ultra modern, product versus only one individual pack of an older item, you're like, well, that's not as fun to hold one pack versus, of course, a booster box. Booster boxes are more fun to hold. Of course, if you wanted, you could open a booster box, but we're a channel that's specifically based on investing. And so for that reason, we're looking at it from an investment perspective, because I do think there's still a ton of value to be had in a lot of these sealed product as well as individual PSA graded cards that I do think are highly undervalued in my opinion, or either they're not undervalued and they just saw a huge retrace, they're at their appropriate value and they're worth the pickup because long term I think they'll do well. But now, without delay, let's jump into it finally. After that full rant, the first item we're going to be having a conversation with actually is first edition PSA 9 cards. So the one we're looking at specifically, it's going to be Fossil. You can take a look at some of the jungle cards, but specifically I want to really focus in on this one for the Articuno. I could, of course, pull up other examples, but I don't want this to be a super long video because it's only 5, but we're going to break down each 5 pretty in-depth. Specifically, one of the things I've noticed a lot of the times is people really like to be able to pay for those PSA 10 first edition cards, those PSA 10 unlimited cards. PSA 9 unlimited is usually not worth it in my opinion. However, PSA 9 first edition, I feel like it's something that gets overlooked a lot of the times people that are huge fans of that kind of WOTC era look to those 10s and say it's extremely unaffordable when you see how much the value or the price of the PSA 10 has gone up over time. If we just want to take a look and see what the value of the 10 was, I apologize for the delay on this. Goodness gracious, this clicking is annoying. We can see that based on the chart, you had it go from as low as the 200s all the way up to as high as kind of 52,000 or 5,200. If we look at the most recent sale, of course, we can see that the PSA 10 did sell for $4,850 or $4,890, so $4,900 basically is what we saw recent sale. So this is of course not accurate because the sales data only goes so far. I would pull it up for Polkadata.io, but they also had a little bit of inaccurate numbers, and we already have this one pulled up here. However, where it gets real interesting to take a look at is if you just want to take the swing high to swing low, let's say, the set in and of itself goes from 205 all the way up to around the high back then 5,200 is what we're going to say, because we're going to ignore that 5,700. If we go 5,200, right, and we'll just say divided by 200, right, you're looking at around a 26x return. If you want to go 57, you can. It's going to be about 27, 28x, right? Now, if we take the value of the 9 and we say to ourselves, okay, well, what was the swing low of the 9? We might actually want to use some of the sales data to do roughly around the price point of in the 30s. I want to say 28 is what it's looking at, right? So you're saying roughly $28. You look at the swing high of it, you're saying 764. Do the math, 764 divided by 28 equals a return of 27. So we did the math. Obviously, we found out for the PSA 10, return was, with a range of error, 26 to 28x. We saw the PSA 9 went up from, the swing low to swing high at around, of course, 27x. So what is that basically indicating in regards to the rate of return? If you had actually invested in PSA 9s, which, of course, when comparing the price of PSA 9s, 5,450, or as we, like I said before, mentioned last time, 4,899, and then you compare it to the most recent sale of 318, of course, it's a lot more affordable as it stands to be investing in the PSA 9 first editions, in my personal opinion. I mean, it doesn't take a math magician to realize the rate, of course, in which it's going to cost someone to enter into a PSA 9 versus a PSA 10. Now, where the counter argument comes into play, and where, of course, I think it is still very important to take everything I say with a grain of salt, is population reports. Obviously, in regards to PSA 10s versus PSA 9s, the overall population report is 10 to 1. You take a look at the history of the PSA 10 population, we'll say right before COVID, I think is a good indicator. So right before COVID, you basically had 123, and then since then, you were sitting on 131. That's about 8 more that's added into the population report. It's not a lot. You take a look at the PSA 9s and you say, all right, we go back to COVID once again. We say to ourselves, all right, there was around 671 and now there's 1,026. That's about another 400. So the percentage difference is basically either a 5% increase or a 40% increase in population. So I think that's one of the reasons why you've seen such a large retracement in regards to the overall general value that you've seen from these PSA 9s versus PSA 10s. When you're looking at, of course, the 9s, the retracement from 764 all the way down to what we just recently saw, it's about roughly 60%, I want to say, right? You take a look at the 10s on the other hand, and we just take a look at the 4800. It's technically speaking been on an uptrend recently if we just look at the recent sales data. So that's where, the price indication on how 10s can, of course, lead in the market, because the low population, after they've had their kind of cool down, you can see a little bit of a rebound in the price. However, of course, there is a level to scalability, I personally think, when it comes to PSA 9 population. It's going to be easier for 9s to go up, but I do think that as you see demand in the general Pokemon market tend to go up, I do think that they will be worth a greater value over time Sure, 40% of course was added to the population, but that doesn't mean that over time, as the kind of, how do I want to say this, the rapid growth of the population that was caused during the pandemic times is not going to slow down, and then eventually allow PSA 9 value cards to basically refollow what the PSA 10s are currently doing. So that's just what I personally think. Of course, you can have your own personal opinion about it, but PSA 9s, I mean, a lot of them had really strong returns, even strong returns when the population was going up, right? It wasn't really until, and if you want to look at it from a chart perspective, obviously you can see this is the high, here are the points, and then here's some of the other more concentrated value pieces. But even if you take this high point away, I mean, it still had a drastically large return of 15, 17x. It's not as good as the 10, but we're talking about what's affordable for people, right? And of course, if you want to take outliers, you know, it's hard to deny that with the 10. Even if you took away these 3 outliers, you still see that growth is continuing with the current general prices of recent sales. But like I said, this is obviously not extremely reflective. It's saying it's saying 5,700 is what we saw last, but we just took a look and saw that it actually is going for 4,800 or 4,900. So there's an argument to be made that basically the value of these PSA 10s is actually starting to go back down again based on just a recent sales history that hasn't been updated yet, since it did just, of course, sell on auction literally yesterday. Or no, it sold on auction 7 days ago. So, but that's kind of my dive for some of the earlier stuff. You can really apply this to, of course, jungle stuff. You can apply this to some of the other first edition sets, but like I said, really want to focus on Articuno. So the next one, because as you guys probably already got spoiled because I was scrolling through all of them to look for an open tab, I apologize. It's going to be first edition. Once again, I'm focusing on fossil, but once again, this applies for jungle. First edition booster packs. I think a lot of the value of these booster packs will be strong over time. Of course, we're focusing once again on affordable for today's video. So taking a look and seeing the value of one of these packs, it's recently sold actually for $218. If I'm correct, we can take a look at that and see under recent sales. I want to ignore this one, but if we go to the actual dot indicator, okay, so we had one sell for as low as 159, but if we take that one away, you had one sell for 232. Okay, so not 218, 232, I do apologize. But either way, if you're telling me that it's selling for in a range of around, you know, the 230, sometimes you got your swing highs, sometimes you got your swing lows. We don't know why. Of course, there could be some that are in better condition than others, but you're just saying to yourself, that's kind of the value that you're getting out of these packs, right? And then we take the current market value, you multiply this, of course, by 36. You're talking about 8,352 if you were to just buy, you know, 36 of these. Of course, some of them are weighted, some of them are unweighted, also going to play a huge factor into it. That's why you're going to get those premiums with those booster boxes, because most of the time, people that are saying that they are weighted for WOTC or unweighted, I mean, there's a lot of information out there, so you have to take that with a grain of salt. And that's why transparency is, of course, important in this market. But once again, if you just take a look at why I personally think these will do well, obviously I've talked about Seal. I think Seal's going to do really well long term. For most popular sets, WOTC, for those people that don't know, was a set that was hyper printed for a lot of the unlimited, a lot of the first edition. People don't realize that. There's a reason why there's so many of these fossil booster boxes out there, especially when you're talking about the previous highs that you saw these sell for and what they're going for now. You saw, of course, started January, end of November 2021, 2022, you saw them selling for as high as 18,000 plus, right? Then you saw middle of June and July of last year, them going for around 11,000, 10,000, 9,000, depending upon, of course, the overall condition of it. Most recently sold on Heritage for 11,100. So it's one of these things where it's really important to understand that this item has retraced almost 50% from its all-time high. What tends to follow that? It's going to be the booster packs. Now, once again, there is a premium to those booster packs, to the booster boxes. So if you are, of course, looking at saying, oh wow, that's a huge retrace, I have, $10,000 to spend. then of course go for it. If you can afford it, I mean, it's 50% of less than what it is going to be, and it's only going to get more scarcer over time as more people open it up. However, when talking about what is affordable for most people, being able to collect these first edition booster packs, I think it's something that is relatively affordable. Obviously, if we just look at the high from literally last year of 2021, near the end of November, we don't have sales history anywhere farther than that. But if we just look at some of the highs, you're talking about 510, 425, 400, 400, 400. So it's already retraced 50% plus as an individual pack. So you're saying to yourself, you've got your swing highs, your swing lows. We'll say maybe these are light packs. Either way, if they're light, if they're not light, at the end of the day, you're still getting at least a 40, 50, 60% value off of investing in some of these first edition booster packs, because regardless of whether they're heavy or not, of course, that'll play premiums, but if they are not, there still is a ability to it, because a lot of people like to collect general art sets for first edition items since they can't afford the booster box. Now, the next item that we're going to be taking a look at is going to be base set shadowless PSA 9s. A lot of the times people talk about PSA 9s from Unlimited, they talk about PSA 9s from first edition shadowless, but I think there is a little bit of a niche that a lot of people don't talk about, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but I don't see a lot of people really talk about shadowless. I feel like shadowless kind of gets left out a lot. Obviously, we're talking about the PSA 10 ratio to the PSA 9 ratio. It's about roughly the same as if we were looking at the Articuno. It's about 11 instead of 10. You take a look at the value of what the 9 was going for. You say peak high 2,250, you can say 1,500, blah, 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 however you want to look at it. You talk about the swing low of around, what are we saying, $36, I think is what we can say the swing low is going to more than likely be. So we'll just say from the swing high to the swing low, say 22,050, right? Or sorry, 2,250, right? Divide that by 36, you're talking about roughly 62x return. You're saying, all right, well, let's say those are fluke numbers, right? Let's say that's just one fluke sale. General value is going to be around 1,500, right? You still say to yourself 1,500 divided by 36, right? From the swing high to swing low of the market, that's still around roughly 42x return. That's literally crypto level returns, right? You say to yourself now, okay, well, if we just take this cluster of sales, right, around these $1,000 price points, and then we say, okay, what's it going for right now? It's going for around 400. Retrace roughly around anywhere between 60, 70 to 80%. And it's still a very low population item. It's not like this item is, in the thousands or so on and so forth for a 9. It's a low pop. And the thing about the 10s is the 10 sales history, we literally, and I looked everywhere because I wanted to see, maybe Polkadot just doesn't have proper information. No, the sales history on these 10s are very, very low. So it's really hard to even know how to scale it to the 10, like what is comparable to the return on what the 10 has given. But even if we just take that away and don't make a comparison from a 10 to a 9 value, you can still say to yourself 46x return, right? And you're saying from the swing low right now, right, 415, and let's say hypothetically for the sake of the argument, let's say it goes all the way to 2250. You say 2250 divided by 415. You're saying to yourself that right now is still a 5x return. Obviously, it's not these crypto level returns, but at the same exact time, market cap was a lot lower. Price of these items were a lot lower and undervalued, and not to mention, more than likely, it's going to break all-time highs down the road as demand in this market continues to go up. It becomes more scarce compared to relative demand. Of course, when I say more scarce compared to relative demand, once again, supply, of course, for singles will still generally go up, but I digress. You understand the point I'm making. Once again, we talk about the same chart in regards to population added. We go back, take a look at the COVID times. You're talking about 29, and then you're saying now it's sitting at 31. So 2 have been added to the market. That's about 6-7%, because of course it's very low, so you can add only 1 or 2 and it'll change percentage-wise a lot. So you're saying around 245 is what we're saying, and then now we're talking about 335. Once again, this is, a 30%, 40% increase in the PSA 9 population, quite a bit. But of course, we're talking about from a per capita perspective, not from an actual general population perspective. So it sounds a lot bigger than it is when you break it down as a per capita, but I think per capita is a lot better to understand. Because if you take a state like the United States, right, and then you take a state such as like the UK or Germany or any of these other European states, if I were to make an argument in regards to saying how many people die each day in the United States, right, or how many people do X in the United States. If I were to say like several hundred million or like tens of millions, right, in the United States, versus I were to say like tens of millions in the UK, when you scale it down to how big the United States is compared to the UK, and you're looking at it per capita, it makes more sense to look at it from a percentage basis than it does make sense in regards to an overall population, because the population is far greater in the United States compared to a lot of these European countries. So it's like, obviously, hopefully that comparison makes sense. I know it's kind of dark. I said that didn't mean it to be dark, but yeah, comparing it the same way in regards to how we look at population reports for items that are still low pop. It still allows you to get that real value without having a high amount of these cards added to the population report. So huge fan of honestly Shadowless, and I do think that there's a lot of them that are undervalued that people are really sleeping on from a returns perspective. Who would have guessed it? Next up is going to be the Shadowless packs. So one of the ones I actually do like, this is going to be on the more expensive end of some of the items we've listed. Most of the items we've listed have been around that $170-ish to $300-ish price point. So this one's going to be more expensive. If you want to talk about being able to grab some of the base set cards or packs, some of the mintier ones are going to be around $500. You can get some of them for as cheap as $350, $400. So they are still relatively expensive based on the condition. However, one of the things, in my personal opinion, that might honestly be worth spending an extra couple hundred more than that is actually picking up some of these blister packs. If you're saying to yourself you're able to pick up a blister pack, which is going to say a true weighted value of that, unweighted, because a lot of the times there's a fear of, is my pack unweighted? Is my pack not unweighted? That's going to give it true value. And you're saying to yourself, well, I can kind of avoid this with these blister packs, which is why there's so many more premiums to it back then. I think that's something that's honestly worth the extra couple bucks, because it's like you're putting equity back into a home when you're investing in that. When you take, like, when you're investing in a home, right? And by investing in a home, let's say you're doing a remodel on a home, that equity that you're taking and you're putting into the home is going to increase the value. If you're saying to yourself, I have a pack and it's worth $500, but then I'm putting equity into it by purchasing a blister variation of that, then that extra $200 that you spend on that blister is going to give it that extra value. Of course, it's not the same because you can't remodel a pack, but the idea still stays the same. It's just adding to the additional value of allowing it to be unweighted. Not to mention, of course, it does have, in my personal opinion, a blister check lane piece that allows it to be more displayable. I think that's kind of cool. You don't, of course, have to do that, but I know a lot of people that do display check lane blisters in their household. So I do think there's just some value to it that a lot of people are really sleeping on. And once again, not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Please do your research and understand the risks. So, but we're just once again talking about now on the higher end scale. If you are willing to spend more than that kind of $150 price point of what we've kind of looked at for a capping, I do think this is something that will do well long term, especially when you see the large retrace that we've seen in a lot of the sealed booster box products. And it's part of the Shadowless era, which is still a very low population. Didn't retrace as hard as, say, some of the first edition Jungle and Fossil that were a lot higher population, but of course I do think this item will do well long term. And lastly, number 5, we are going to be having a discussion about. This one's going to be actually very interesting. This is going to be dark and light cards. So I want to point specifically to this Feraligatr, and I think it's a good example. I think it's actually a great example when we're comparing it. So if you look at the dark Feraligatr returns, the Feraligatr return from its low of 127, and then if we're just saying off of this one individual sale, it's 2,500, right? So you say 2,500, we'll say that's the sale. Of course, you can always say fluke, but we're just going to go with what we're saying here right now. So we're going to say 19.6, roughly around 20% return, right? Or sorry, 20x return. Then you say to yourself, all right, 1850 to 500, right? So to keep this number in mind, it's around that $20 or 20x return, 500 divided by 1850, right? That's 27. You're actually getting a greater return on a 9 than you are a 10, what we've seen historically. If you take away the flukes from the swing high to the 9 and the swing high to the 10, then the 10 is actually still, it's only going to increase the argument that I'm currently making in regards to why 10 pickups are not as nearly as good as 9 pickups. And you might say to yourself, well, Eli, why is that? And of course, this isn't the same for everything. When I make, and I want this to be very clear, I want people to understand this. When I make these arguments for PSA 9 holos, please understand that certain PSA 9 holos are going to be better investments than others. So this is not generally speaking. When I say this goes for fossil as well as jungle, I don't mean that in the way of literally every single fossil card, every single jungle card. What I mean that is you can find cards that are in jungle that are also going to look the same way from a charting perspective as some of the cards in fossil. So once again, when saying light versus dark, this isn't going to apply for every light card. This isn't going to apply for every dark card, but it's still something that is, in my personal opinion, something to take into consideration, specifically speaking, because if you look at the PSA 10 population report, we've got 71 that are currently in existence, right? And you look at the PSA 9 population report, there are 166. One of these is not like the other. We take a look at some of the PSA 9 holos from Fossil and Jungle. The population report from, of course, Fossil and Jungle era, they're about a 10-to-1 to 11-to-1 ratio. This is about a 1-to-2, 1-to-3 ratio, or 1 to 2.5, I should say. 1 to 3 is pushing it. And that is a really low ratio. And so because of that, you see that disparity in regards to the population of the 10 being so close to the 9, which is very interesting because you would think it would be the other way around. You think, if anything, it would be hurting the 9 compared to the 10, or it hurt the 10 more compared to the 9. It's hard to explain what I'm basically trying to say. It sounds kind of confusing, but the point that I'm generally trying to make with this is that there is that level of scarcity with the 9 that you don't see with a lot of these other cards, comparing it from that ratio. Of course, we did take a look at that Shadowless, still had that 11-to-1 ratio. Of course, the population is extremely low. It's really hard to kind of track that scanny data, but when you're talking about the data that we're seeing with these lights versus darks, there are some of these lights versus dark cards that are very interesting. Like I said, specifically this for Alligator, where you're saying to yourself, this is kind of weird. The population report isn't 1,000-to-1. It's not, it's not 11-to-1. I shouldn't say 1,000-to-1. Sorry, it's 1,000 versus like 100. It's not 10-to-1. It's not 11-to-1. Because we've talked about this before. Population report is very important. You take a look at a lot of these uncommon cards, common cards in these first edition eras. Not the biggest fan of it. A perfect example of where you can see overinflation is you take a look at like the Jungle Pikachu. I love making that example. Jungle Pikachu at one point was going for around $1,000+. It, of course, got hyperinflated based off of everyone sending theirs in to be graded. You saw it tank from $1,000 all the way down to as low as $100 and some odd dollars at some point. It started to pick back up a little bit in value. I think it's sitting at around $200, but you're saying from the swing high to swing low on that, you're talking about more than a 90% retrace, which is absolutely insane, which is why common, uncommon, it's very hard for me to really want to tell people to invest in those items from a non-financial advice perspective, of course, my opinion. So it just makes me a lot more kind of, how do I want to say this, intrigued when I see cards that are holographics, that are desired cards from a site with such great returns and such low population. I do feel as if this is something that a lot of people aren't noticing. Of course, then you ask yourself, well, what about the retrace? You say the retrace value from the high to the low. Retrace was well over 50% if we're talking swing high to swing low. Over here, it's about 40% if you're looking at this one. And then you take a look once again from the swing high to swing low. It's around 500. We say hypothetically, and we can go look this up right now if you guys want to. Let's go look this up right here. And we'll say PSA 9. And we can see, okay, Dark for Alligator, PSA 9. So last one did sell for, this is hollow, this is PSA 8. PSA 9 did sell for around $240. So, from, here's, this is chip capsule though. See, this is where it's important to take a look at these things because there's always going to be variables that aren't factored in when you're looking at some sites like Polkadata and Pokemarket. So we're saying, what was it again? We said what, 306 was one of them. We said 240 plus $40 shipping, so like 280ish, we'll say, right? So if you're saying from swing high, it's around 40 to 50%. So the retrace on this, in all honesty, if you are talking about, if you take this one out of the variable, it's around the same from a retracement perspective. You know, and if you're saying to yourself, you do think a niche, and I wouldn't even call them that niche, to be quite frankly, because it is part of the Neo era, specifically this one's from Neo Destiny, I do think these are items that will do really well long term, because it is, for Alligator, still a starter card, it's still a desirable card, and there's going to be other Neo cards that I do think that people are going to be sleeping on. But hopefully this item, of course, is something you guys consider. Once again, do your own research. This is only my personal opinion. But yeah, as far as giving the main points in the wrap up to my top 5 items that I, of course, discussed. Number 1 is generally PSA 9 holos from first edition. Of course, like I said, first edition. One of the ones we took a look at was Articuno. This includes typically Fossil as well as Jungle. It's not going to be for all of them. It's going to be specific ones. That's why we focused on Articuno. Number 2, Fossil first edition booster packs. Of course, like I mentioned before, blisters are going to add that extra premium. If you want to get blisters, that's great, because you're going to have less of that kind of unawareness in regards to the overall weight. But you've seen the retracement of booster boxes go from around $18,000 to around $10,000 to $11,000. So the pack prices have tended to follow that as well. So I do think that long term, these are going to be good items to pick up, and they're still relatively affordable compared to ultra modern booster box prices. Next item, once again, talking about the Shadowless base set. PSA 9 cards. We took a look at the Alakazam, realized that population is still relatively low, and when we talk about how high it went from its low to its high, you had a massive gain around 62x return. Of course, it's retraced a decent amount to the point of where I think it's a really cheap pickup, and at some point may be an argument to say it overcorrected from its high if we are going from swing high. Not going to swing high, still really good pickup, all things considered. And then, of course, once again, talking about the blister price, I don't have it anymore shown. Blister price for the base set Shadowless. I like the blister more just because it's a couple extra bucks more, or a couple hundred extra to invest in that, guarantee that there's going to be an unweight. If you want to spend the couple 400 to 500 versus, the 650 to 700, then you can go ahead and do that yourself. But personally, that's kind of what I like. And then lastly, last but not least, of course, once again, talking about some of these light and dark cards. Dark for Alligator specifically is the one we looked at. I do think there's a lot of them that are, undervalued when you compare the population reports as well as the rate of return on value that you saw from these 9s to 10s, because general ratios are around 10 to 1, 11 to 1 plus for a lot of these first edition sets, and even higher for unlimited. But when, of course, you talk about the ratio that we see here, it's around 2.5 to 1, which is a really good ratio, and that's why you've seen the general value of the 9s from a percentage perspective actually outpace the overall general value of the 10s. But hopefully you guys found this video fruitful. Hopefully you guys found some of my personal information. I hope you found it informative. But as far as it goes, as always, if you want to enter into our weekly giveaways, leave a like, comment down below, be subscribed to the YouTube channel. We post videos each and every week, Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for you to enter in by commenting and liking. We're going to have 3 winners each and every week. Each winner is going to be receiving 12 Brilliant Star booster packs. So more opportunities to enter and a ton of opportunities to win. But as far as it goes, that is all I have for today's video. Thank you guys all so much for watching. Until then, I will see you guys on Wednesday. Peace.